Good evening. My name is Chuck Marquardt. I'm a board member with the South Carthay Neighborhood Association. Welcome to this forum for candidates of the Los Angeles City Council representing CD-5. This event is sponsored by the South Carthay, Carthay Square, and Carthay Circle Neighborhood Associations in collaboration with Temple Beth Am and the Barentine Group. 6 candidates have agreed to participate in tonight's forum. My role is to handle to the best of my ability the technology and questions that come up from participants. You'll notice there's a chat bar that you can, you're probably familiar with Zoom at this point in the pandemic. So simply write your questions into the chat bar. Please note that questions are not going to be to specific candidates, but for all candidates to answer. I'd like to introduce you at this point to your moderator for the evening, Brad Kane, President of the South Carthay Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited this evening. You know, I wish the rest of the country had as many good candidates as we do this evening. I've talked to many of them, and we are going to get their vision for what they want to see happen in CD-5 and in our city. The ground rules are simple. We are going to give each candidate the opportunity to answer the same question. Each question will allow for approximately 1 minute per person. If you go beyond that, I will politely interrupt you. We're not CNN. And also we have technical difficulties if we try and mute people. So what we're going to do, though, is ask people to give their inspiring vision. I'm honored that we have so many people joining us tonight to see what vision they want to join. I hope everybody finds a candidate or two that they're inspired by. And to make sure everyone has a fair chance, we're going to rotate the order. So each time we do this, we will be starting with a different person. Now, we're going to proceed with introductions. Each candidate will get 1 minute to introduce themselves. If time permits, after we get through the 6 questions, and I really wanted to do more Carthay focused stuff, but with the number of people we have, I had to zoom out a little bit. And then we will get some questions from the audience. Chuck is going to help me with that. And then if their time permits, or because again, we're not CNN, if people want to stay beyond the 8:30, we can, still allow everybody to give a 1 minute closing. But I also know people have kids and schedules and things. So we're trying to get the bulk of it in by 8:30. With that understanding, we're going to start with people in the order they appeared on the flyer, which is the order that they confirmed. And so our first candidate will introduce herself is Katie Yaroslavsky.
Thanks so much. So I'm a climate attorney, a policymaker, and a mom to 3 young kids. Incidentally, we live in South Carthay and are a Pressman family too. I'm running because I want LA to remain a place where we can all thrive, but we need effective, ethical, and proven leadership to make that happen. I spent 10 years in the private sector as a land use attorney and the general counsel of a climate change nonprofit. And for the last 6 years, I've made policy for LA County's 10 million people as a senior policy advisor to County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, where I created a utility, LA County's first sustainability office, and one of our region's largest jobs and infrastructure programs, Measure W. My priorities on the council are 1, reduce the inflow into homelessness and create more flexible and affordable housing. 2, deliver excellent constituent services, and 3, make LA climate resilient. I have a record of creating coalitions and problem solving. It's why I have the support of Congresswoman Karen Bass, State Senators Ben Allen and Cindy Comlager, Assemblyman Isaac Bryan, Sheila Kuehl, and hundreds of civic and business leaders. I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And you were amazingly on time. All right, our next introduction will be from Scott Epstein.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the Carthay Square, Carthay Circle, and South Carthay Neighborhood Associations for doing this tonight. My name is Scott Epstein. I believe that this moment requires leaders who are both connected to community and committed to progress. That's what I have to offer. I was the neighborhood council chair for the neighborhood just north of you, Mid-City West, for 7 years. And in that capacity, we were able to do amazing amount of good on a shoestring budget. We were able to bring millions of dollars into our community to make our streets safer. We were able to connect homeless neighbors with services and housing. And we were able to make sure that the development projects that came into Mid-City West were better than when they came to us, by leveraging more affordable units and making sure that they improve the public realm surrounding them. That's the spirit I'll bring to City Council. An ability to bring communities along to change and fix the systemic problems we have in our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next candidate will be Sam Yebri. Sam, please give your introduction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Yebri, and I'm running for Los Angeles City Council because I love this city to my core. Los Angeles has enabled me and my family to live the American dream. My parents and I arrived in Los Angeles when I was a year old as refugees from Iran, went to 3 local public schools in the district, then went to Yale and USC for law school. And then 11 years ago, I was proud to start my own law firm here in the district, where I have fought for tenants, workers, refugees, and individuals with disabilities. Over the last 15 years, I've served on numerous nonprofit boards, on city commissions, and on the board of the Westwood Library and our own homeowners association board. Meanwhile, my wife and I and our 4 young kids have watched our city decline on every issue: an explosion of homelessness, crime, and corruption. City Hall has failed us. That's why I'm running for City Council, to fight for this city. And I'm committed to running a different type of campaign, one that puts communities and neighborhoods and families first. That's why I'm not accepting money from real estate developers, PACs, or any special interests of any kind. I look forward to discussing our issues with you tonight.
Thank you. All right, Jimmy Biblars, could you give your introduction, please?
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Jimmy Biblars. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday, I'd like to briefly acknowledge that we're on native Tongva land. Since we'll be talking about land use and housing tonight, I think it's important to acknowledge the Indigenous roots of the LA Basin. We should always be thinking about ways that we can right historic wrongs done to Indigenous people and other marginalized groups here in LA. I grew up just down the road from the Carthay neighborhoods in Pico Robertson and graduated proudly from Hamilton High, go Yankees, in the heart of Jewish Los Angeles. When I was 12, my family was evicted from our half of a small duplex apartment, and it was really horrible for us. We were chased around the city by housing affordability, and both of my parents struggled very seriously with substance use in the aftermath of the eviction, and luckily are both in recovery now. And even then, as a young kid, I knew that this just wasn't right. And it really ignited a political awakening in me that I've continued that fight against inequality ever since. I'm running to make LA a place where everyone can afford to thrive. We're about getting to the heart of the issues. No more band-aids for lasting problems. And I'm eager to talk about more specific policy solutions with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Irwin, could you give us your introduction, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Christina Irwin. I am not a career politician. I'm not an attorney. I am simply a mom to 3 kids and a real estate agent. My parents immigrated here from the former Republic of Yugoslavia, Serbia. So I came here when I was 3. I know what communism is, socialism. It's not pretty. And, you know, with all these mandates, the heart of the issue is I'm for parental choice, pro-medical freedom, and being endorsed by Mike Garcia and Kevin Kiley. That is very big. And I will be fighting for our kids, as well as local issues such as homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And last but not least, Molly Bassler, could you give us your introduction?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Molly Basler, and I'm running for LA City Council to create positive change for Los Angeles, the people of Los Angeles and CD-5. I am people-powered. I am a progressive Democrat, and I am running a green and regenerative campaign because I think it's important that we lead by example. I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles. I've seen the demise of our city, and I'm running to create, like I said, positive change. I'm a climate reality leader trained by Al Gore. I'm an organizer. I've organized the Green Dream campaign a couple years ago, launched with the West LA Democratic Club. And I am a small business owner, and I've lived in the district for 20 years. So as I said, I've seen the demise of LA, and I want to serve the people of Los Angeles and the district to make green and positive change, because as I've said, the homelessness and affordable housing and the climate crisis and animal welfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to our first question, which is the unhoused. The single biggest concern on the minds of residents these days is the level of homelessness and the apparent cost of creating supportive housing and shelters for our unhoused friends and neighbors. The question that I'm going to ask each of you to answer in 1 minute or less is, please identify 3 specific things you would support and the city can do right now to reduce the number of unhoused people in our city. And under our rotation of orders, Scott Epstein, sir, I will do my best, goes first.
Okay, lots of folks get it wrong. I answered to both.
Thank you. All right. Would you like to proceed?
That would be great. Thank you very much. So yes, this is really the number one issue that our city is facing right now. And there's a lot we can do right away. So the first thing that I would say is we need a range of temporary solutions. We all know that permanent supportive housing is an important solution, but it's not happening overnight. So we need to act aggressively to get our unhoused neighbors into temporary situations. That could look like tiny home villages. It could look like safe parking. It could look like safe camping. Anything is better than the alternative that we have right now, which is our unhoused neighbors in our alleys, on our sidewalks, in our parks. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need aggressive outreach that's properly funded and properly coordinated to our unhoused neighbors. And that includes with encampments, because encampments are a public safety and health hazard for both housed and unhoused folks alike. So that's a real issue. And we are seeing in some parts of the city aggressive action in a humane way with outreach workers to solve problems, to connect people to the services that they need. So that would be the second thing.
Interrupt you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Sam Yebri, would you like me to repeat the question or are you good to go?
Good to go. When I walk around the district, I'm horrified that we let our neighbors suffer on the streets like this. I'm furious that 5 Angelinos are dying on the streets every day, while our city and county spend $2 billion per year without urgency, common sense, or accountability on the homelessness crisis. We're spending 5 years and upwards of $800,000 per unit to build brand new homeless housing. That is insanity. Last week, I volunteered at a homeless service day in Westwood, and each unsheltered person I spoke to had a different story and different needs. I spoke to a survivor of domestic violence, which is the leading cause of homelessness among women. I spoke to 2 teenage brothers who fell out of the foster care system, a veteran who can't get his government benefits, and a college community student living in his car. And of course, there are those with severe mental health and addiction issues. Housing is necessary, but it's not sufficient to address the trauma of living on the streets. And the county that's responsible for addressing mental health is failing our homeless population. The results speak for themselves. Now we need a course correction right now. First, we need to build shelters and tiny homes immediately on underutilized government land, but not our parks and beaches. Acquire hotels, motels, and apartments, streamline affordable housing construction, and prevent the tenants from falling into homelessness. And then for mental health and addiction, shift dollars to the nonprofits that are doing this hard work, build more mental health and addiction facilities, and change our mental health laws so we can get the folks they need before it's too late.
Thank you. All right. Jimmy Biblars. Sir, would you like me to repeat the question?
I am good to go.
Excellent. Okay.
First is a reorientation, a different approach that is what's called housing first. Every place that has ever made serious inroads in homelessness has adopted a housing first model. What that means is have housing and services tied together in the same place. So often we geographically divorce them, where services are concentrated in downtown and housing is dotted throughout the city. When you bring them together, people are much more likely to stay in the housing and stay connected to the services. Second, individualized outreach. Get to know every unhoused person by name. That's the only thing that we've seen work in any meaningful way. We've seen it at the Berendo and Sunset encampment. We've seen it in the beach communities. That targeted specific outreach by council staff, by LAHSA staff really does wonders. And third, and perhaps most importantly, is preventing people from being pushed into homelessness. 211 people are pushed into homelessness every single day. We house 207. If we don't stop the push, the aggressive forces of inequality that push people into homelessness, you can clear every encampment in the city, and in 6 months, they'll be back. If you're not pushing both levers, you're not solving the problem. Thank you.
Okay. Christina Irwin, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good to go?
I'm good to go.
Great.
So there is a part where we all agree homelessness is a huge issue. I mean, you know, we go to parks. I go to the parks with my kids and I see encampments everywhere. I'm bike riding. I see encampments. You know, this is more than an issue of unhoused neighbors or homeless. 70% of these people have mental illnesses, and that's horrible. These are veterans. These, you know, could be people we've known, could be people we know. They could be strangers. And I've even seen families out on the street, and it's horrible. The first thing that we need to do is not those tiny homes that are 800,000. That's a great temporary solution. However, my solution is a wraparound services. We can use the old VA building that's really not used for much, abandoned malls. There's a lot of federal and state buildings we can use to make wraparound services. For instance, maybe the first floor can be for, you know, rehabilitation for alcoholism, drugs. The second part would be for mental illnesses. That's what we need to implement right
Christina,
now.
thank you. And then Molly Bassler. Are you
Okay,
ready to
yeah.
go?
Yes, I'm ready to go. So yeah, homelessness, and I always say homelessness and affordable housing goes hand in hand. We don't have enough housing to get these people off the street. Yes, temporary, small housing, but I also believe in repurposing all these old vacant buildings that we have around the city and reopening mental health facilities, and getting the mentally ill housed in facilities, taking care of them, getting the drug and alcohol, the people addicted to those substances into rehab, and actually then train them to possibly be homeless advocates. And then we have the families and the children, and that we need, of course, then we need the affordable housing. And repurposing. Because this is a humanitarian crisis, and in one of the wealthiest cities, it really shouldn't be happening, and especially with all the money that has gone towards it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Katie Yaroslavsky, are you ready to go?
Sure. So just as there's no one reason people become homeless, there isn't a silver bullet to solve it. There's a bunch of different solutions we need, but here are three. So first, we need a closer partnership with LA County on the provision of services and care. So the county actually provides all of the health services and the city does the shelter, but they're not necessarily working hand in glove, and they really need to be. I spent the last 6 years working at the County Board of Supervisors, and so I understand the programs that are available, and we'll partner closely to make sure the city and the county are collaborating on provision and care, everything from mental health services to physical health and addiction services. Second, we received a ton of money from the feds, and we should use that money to buy existing hotels and motels and convert them, prioritize less expensive alternatives like safe parking, safe camping, tiny homes, and we need to be lobbying the feds hard to make more Section 8 vouchers available to Angelenos. And then third, this has been mentioned, we should reduce the inflow into homelessness. Every day more people are falling into homelessness than we're getting off the streets, and so reducing the rate of inflow is key. So we should triple or quadruple what we're spending on homelessness prevention, and there's a suite of things that we need to be doing on that front. Everything from tenant protections to emergency rental assistance, right to counsel, and so on.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go on to question 2. I want to thank everyone for some really excellent answers. And the next question is very near and dear to the hearts of the Carthay community. Recently passed and signed into law, SB 10 allows the construction of 10 units, 10 residential units on any property. But in order for it to affect people in Los Angeles, it must be adopted by the city. It must be passed by our city council. SB 10, though, has no carve out for historic neighborhoods like ours. Each Carthay is its own historic preservation overlay zone, meaning the city has recognized their historic status. And the 3 neighborhoods combined have this year submitted an application for the state and Federal Historic Register. So we would like to know, do you support the city adopting SB 10? Why or why not? And Sam Yebri, you get to go first.
Sure, thank you. I publicly and categorically oppose SB 9 and 10, SB 50, and every prior iteration of those bills. Both bills are flawed. We have a massive affordable housing crisis, yet these bills do nothing to mandate affordable housing. Instead, they will gentrify neighborhoods, worsen our housing crisis, and like you said, destroy historical neighborhoods in our city. So I will oppose those bills when they come to Los Angeles. In terms of HPOZ and historical preservation, one of the things that makes Los Angeles so special is our unique and historic neighborhoods. And we have a duty to protect those historic buildings, institutions, and neighborhoods, and I will do that as a council member. I will fight to protect South Carthay and every neighborhood that wishes to be part of a historical preservation overlay zone.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jimmy Biblars.
Thanks so much for the question. After my family was evicted from Pico Robertson, we moved into an HPAWS zone in West Adams for a while, just off Crenshaw and Adams and those avenues. And I so loved living in that HPAWS zone. And I saw immensely the benefits of having, in West Adams, it's those old craftsmen, whereas in Carthay, it's the colonial revivals, how vibrant and exceptional and cool the historic preservation neighborhoods are. And I absolutely agree with Sam that the vibrancy of our neighborhoods is the diversity. LA is the 1,000 cities or 1,000 towns in search of a city. And I think that's what makes our city so wonderful and a place that we all care so much about, that immense interestingness. And I was very glad to see that SB 9 had a historic preservation carve out. I would have liked to see that in SB 10. I think if the council ultimately were to adopt it, there would be a local carve out for HPAW zones. As much as vibrant as our neighborhoods are, I think that I don't see neighborhood change and neighborhood vibrancy and neighborhood character as at odds with each other. I see change as part and parcel of good and healthy and vibrant neighborhoods. So I was on record as supporting SB 9 and 10. I think we need more housing in all forms. And I definitely support, though, a carve out for HPAW zones in SB 10.
Okay, thank you. Christina Irwin.
I vehemently oppose SB 9 and 10 because we are a diverse neighborhood. As a real estate agent, I have seen many houses. I've gone to open houses. I've sold there. I've helped clients buy there. Just like Hancock Park, Carthay Circle, wonderful array of beautiful historic homes. And that's just going to squash everything. Yes, we do need housing, but we do not need to, pass these laws in order for that to happen. There are different ways and different ways we can do and different things we can do about it. I think it needs to stay the same, and I oppose that for that reason.
All right, thank you. Molly Basler, and I apologize about mispronouncing your name earlier.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Basler. Thank you. Yes, I oppose also SB 9 and 10. I believe in preserving our historic neighborhoods, and the fact that SB 9 and 10 has come around is just it will create quite a disaster within our neighborhoods. So I oppose them.
I'm sorry, I apologize. My phone went off. That was not for you.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. So yes, and protecting our neighborhoods, the beauty of our communities, and especially the historic ones. It's also better to repurpose and refurbish, and instead of tearing down and rebuilding, it helps our environment and helps the community. And also we need to, SB 9 and 10 take away the control of the community, which we have to have in order to preserve the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Yaroslavsky, and before we go forward, I'm getting text, Chuck, that a number of people, including the president of South Carthay, Carthay Circle, cannot get on. People are trying to get on. So if you can find a way to make that work, great. All right, Katie Yaroslavsky, please go ahead.
So I don't support SB 9 or 10 for a variety of reasons, but at the core, I think we really need to be focused on affordable housing and workforce housing, also known as middle income housing. We also need to be doing real community planning and putting additional density near job centers and transportation that the people who live in the housing are actually going to use. We have a real opportunity with some of the biggest job centers on the west side in Council District 5. And I think that's where we should be focused on doing updates to the community plan. And we can do that in a way that doesn't touch our single family neighborhoods. And as a land use attorney, who practiced for 4 years, I really understand how important community process and engagement is, and think we have a real opportunity to decide together as a series of communities and neighborhoods where we want to put that housing. And we can definitely do that in a way that doesn't touch single family housing zones. In terms of HPOZs and their protection, I live in South Carthay in an HPOZ in an old duplex. I love the character, and it's why we live here in part. And I think it's what makes LA special, one of the many things. And so I think we need to protect and preserve it, and also be thoughtful and creative and flexible about how we build the housing that we actually need, which isn't a ton more market rate right now.
Thank you. Okay, Scott Epstein.
Yes. So I do not support the use of SB 10 in historic zones. But I will say that we need a lot more housing in this town. And I think we can accomplish that together as a local community. So, you know, we were talking about homelessness just a while ago, and what wasn't mentioned was, yes, of course, it's a complicated issue with many subpopulations, and mental health and substance abuse are a big piece of it, and services is a big piece of the solution. But the burgeoning of our homeless crisis over the last decade is all about the increase in our housing crisis, the increase in prices, the increase in unaffordability of our city. We can only address that by building more housing and by making sure the housing that we build is less expensive. There's a lot of ways to do that, but we need to come together as a community and have those conversations about where that housing needs to go. CD-5 is the most expensive district in the city. I think it's unacceptable that a line cook at our local restaurants, that a teacher at our local schools, that the nurse at Cedars-Sinai or UCLA Reagan can't afford to live here.
Okay.
We need to change that together. We can do that.
All right, thank you. Now, it's sort of a related question here on development. Much of CD-5, and if you look just to our south, there are 7-story buildings rising from Pico, which previously had nothing more than 2 stories. And we are experiencing unprecedented development and speculation, exponentially increasing real estate values and costs, and major disruption from metro and other constructions. Studies suggest we in the city of Los Angeles have 50,000 vacant luxury units and more than 50,000 unhoused people. My question to each of the candidates is, how would you ensure that development will benefit residents in the community, both those displaced and those still residing in the area? And Jimmy Biblars, could you go first?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that for so long, we have allowed developers basically a blank check in this city, that through these promises of development and luxury condo after luxury condo, we've said to developers, what you do is good, what you do is productive, you're moving the city forward. And the accommodations and the extractions that we have asked of developers suddenly fall out of every one of these plans. It goes from 25% guaranteed affordable units to 10%, and all of a sudden it's 2 offsite units, and the developer gets to pick who ends up landing in them. So I think one is holding developers' feet to the fire. This is a city that has such demand for housing that developers are able to make a healthy and handsome profit when you ask for 30, 40% and demand affordable units. Second, I think that there's opportunities for real strategic mixed use commercial residential development along underutilized transit corridors, places like Westwood Boulevard, Robertson, where I grew up, Washington and Culver City, Ventura in the Valley, places that are eager for more walkability, places that are eager for more street fare to go to the businesses. And if you put housing on top of the businesses along those areas, it would take some of the development pressure off the Wilshire corridor and the Carthay areas.
Thank you. Christina Irwin.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. How would you ensure that development will benefit residents in the community, both those displaced and those still residing in the area?
Well, you know, we are a free market capital. We're capitalist society. It's all about free market. Being a real estate agent, I don't have anything against developers. You know, how they want to do stuff is how they want to do stuff. Now, again, addressing the homeless issue, that is also, like I said, wraparound services. That's what we need. We need, you know, we need a consequence. the fact that we just let them have encampments is not okay. And what our sheriff has done to a great extent is commendable. But, you know, we need to be accountable for some of these things. And developers, like I said, what else can they do? They're building, yes. But you know, what Scott just said, we have those mixed use properties in Culver City, in Westwood. We have those. They haven't done much good. I mean, we still have a problem. It's a supply and demand issue. People want to live here because of the beautiful weather. They want to live here because of Hollywood. I don't foresee this as an easy, quick solution. This is something that, you know, talking to my constituents, we have to put our heads together and we need to come up with a better solution.
All right, thank you. Molly Basler.
Yes, thank you. I mean, yes, this is part of the problem. The major problem of our homelessness is of developing luxury buildings and have outpriced so many people. And I think we need to put restrictions on developing and come together somehow with the developers in what is right and what is wrong and what is good for the people and the people who live in the district. There has got to be a way for us to, I mean, the divisions keep getting wider instead of bringing us together, and that's the developers, the community, and not keep having this disparity. And that we need to build affordable housing, and then instead of just building more is to repurpose buildings, especially for people who are unhoused. And that needs to be a priority. It has to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Katie Yaroslavsky.
So in terms of avoiding displacement, I think we should have a right to return for displaced tenants, and we should insist on a higher percentage of affordable units. One of the things I've noticed about moving from the private sector to the public sector is that government tends to lack staff in-house who actually have real estate financing experience. And so over and over again, we, the public, get less in terms of community benefits than we should. So we need to be savvier about how we engage in a negotiation with a developer when they have a discretionary entitlement that they're requesting. We also need to be entering into public-private partnerships and being more creative about how we co-fund projects and basically buy down affordability in projects. We have a real opportunity. We're sitting on a ton of cash. The county has a bunch of cash, the city has cash, the feds have cash, and we should be actively entering into partnerships with private developers to buy affordability in the projects that they're building. And then the flip side, how do we make sure that the existing community is on board with what's being proposed? That's process. We need more process.
Okay.
And engagement from the community.
Thank you. Scott Epstein.
So thank you for this question. I've been doing this work for nearly a decade at Mid-City West. Have reviewed, hundreds of mixed-use projects. Well, maybe not quite that many, but a lot. And we've been able to make them better. So the Caruso project at San Vicente and Burton Way, we were able to negotiate for the first time Caruso ever did any affordable units in one of his projects. He always does luxury units. We were able to negotiate to have millions of dollars of public realm improvements surrounding that project, including expanded crosswalks, new bicycle infrastructure, lots of things to make that very hairy intersection safer to cross and navigate. And so, we need to be having conversations about how to make these projects not just smaller, which is often the conversation, but better. I have a lot of experience doing that. The other thing that I will say is that we need to make sure that we're steering development to the locations that are displacement free. I have a long history of opposing projects that displace human beings. These projects on the major boulevards can be an answer that to develop.
I got to cut you off here. I'm sorry. Sam, are you ready to go?
Yes. So we all agree we have a massive affordable and middle income housing crisis. I think of my 4 kids and worry how they're going to afford to live in the city that we love. Housing costs are crushing families, including the most vulnerable among us. That's why I serve on the board of EDA, a leading provider of housing for adults with special needs. Not too far from Carthay and Temple Beth Am, EDA is building a 64-unit mixed-use housing project on Pico and Rexford, across from Pat's, with ground floor retail for the residents with disabilities to work. But EDA is more than 2 years into the process, and we're still waiting on entitlements, not because of neighborhood opposition, but because of City Hall's bureaucratic delays and failure to prioritize and streamline these type of win-win projects. In addition to making it easier and faster to build affordable, supportive, and workforce housing, we must prevent people from falling into homelessness. And that's exactly what I have done for more than a decade as a board member and volunteer lawyer with Bethesda Legal Services. Finally, we can't continue to demolish rent-controlled units without doing more to increase our affordable housing stock. That's another reason why I'm not taking money from real estate developers or any special interests. Bottom line, despite this crisis, City Hall has failed to protect, expand, and streamline affordable housing. It's time to hold City Hall accountable for its failures.
Okay. I want to thank you all for some really excellent answers. And if it were up to me, we'd spend another 2 hours on this topic, as it's a great passion of mine. But I need to move on to some other topics a little bit here. For the next one is transit. Many
And
residents.
Brad, if I may, I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule. Could we do one follow-up question from the audience about that?
Absolutely, please.
Excellent. So this is from Aaron Michael. And he's asking, LA City Council recently passed anti-camping and homelessness ordinance 41.18, making it illegal to sit or sleep in certain areas. What are your views on this ordinance? Support or oppose?
All right. Christina Irwin, you are the first one up for this question.
Okay, I support that because as a mother of 3 kids, like I said, I take my kids to the park and I see homeless there. You know, I've been yelled at by homeless with my kids. It's very scary. And, you know, sitting at the bus stop, my oldest is going to be in high school taking the bus next year. I certainly don't want him sitting next to a homeless that is, you know, mentally not all there. And it's a public safety issue. It's his right to be there. Yes, it's the homeless's right, but not when he's encroaching on tax-paying dollars. So I do support that.
All right. Thank you. Molly Basler.
Molly, give me just a second. There we go.
Do not support that. I think it's, first of all, what are you going to do? Ticket them and they're going to show up to court or pay it? No, it's you know, criminalizing the homeless. And bottom line is we need to house them. We need to get the mentally ill in mental facilities, get the drug and alcohol people, you know, rehabbed and taken care of, all the people taken care of and housed, and not criminalize them and then ticket them or arrest them.
All right. Thank you. Katie Yaroslavsky.
So I think we should be focused on getting people on the streets, off the streets, and connected to housing and services. And I think we need to reduce the inflow into homelessness in the first place. And that's how we're going to make meaningful progress. I think that there are certain places where the public interest necessitates sort of balancing and saying, yes, there are places where once we've connected people who are, say, sleeping in parks or on beaches, once we've connected people to housing and services and sort of cleared the encampment that way through sort of a sustained outreach effort, it's okay to say, okay, no one now going forward can sleep in these places. But I don't think it's humane to just move people from one sidewalk to a different sidewalk when they're as vulnerable as they are. And the focus should really be on connecting to housing and services, which means really acting with urgency to create much more flexible, less expensive, quick options.
All right. Thank you. Scott Epstein.
So I am opposed to the anti-camping ordinance, and I've been outspoken about this, and I'll tell you why. So the anti-camping ordinance is a great tool if what you want to do is close an encampment on your corner and have a new encampment on the next corner the next week. It is not going to solve the problem. What we need is sustained and coordinated outreach to our unhoused neighbors to connect them to services. And we need a pipeline of temporary and permanent supportive housing to send them to. That is the solution. The anti-camping ordinance will not get us there. And it's not humane.
Okay, thank you. Then Sam Yebri.
I think it's helpful to explain what the ordinance says, Chuck and Brad. So 4118 says you can't sit, lie, or sleep or store your personal belongings 2 feet next to a hydrant, 5 feet next to someone's door, 10 feet next to a driveway, or under certain conditions within 500 feet of a school, daycare, park, or other facilities. I support the ordinance. It will not solve homelessness, and we can't arrest our way out of homelessness, but it's a necessary part of the overall response. Since the pandemic started, we've seen the explosion of homeless encampments, including throughout CD-5. This is not an acceptable way for people to live. While we work toward the end goal of bringing everyone indoors and building enough housing for everyone, it's imperative that we maintain basic public health standards on our sidewalks, parks, and near schools. We owe it to all Angelenos, housed and unhoused, to keep our public safe spaces clean, safe, and accessible for everyone.
Thank you. Jimmy Biblars.
It's really simple. This ordinance is not going to improve conditions for the unhoused. Instead of continuing to pass short-term fixes, it's time to address this issue at its core. Local policy must be designed to actually help people get off the streets and into safe housing. 60,000 unhoused people in one of the world's wealthiest cities is a moral crisis. People need safe places to sleep, financial support, mental health services, and help battling the demons of addiction. This ordinance will not fix that. First, the Ninth Circuit ruled in Boise v. Barton, and the United States Supreme Court recently upheld the Boise v. Barton case, that cities like Los Angeles cannot move people off the streets without offering them a robust and real place to go. So the legality of this ordinance is absolutely in question, further opening the city up to expensive, time-consuming, costly, and wasteful litigation, which is a tremendous amount of wasted resources in the city. We can't demand that people be moved off the streets without offering them a place to go with real services. Even if the ordinance was legal, we would be spending money to move people only to see the same people return in no better shape than when we forced them out.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to return to our previously scheduled list of questions, and Chuck will interrupt me again when there's a large push for another question. But here's the one I want to go with. This is on transit. Many residents, particularly those who are elderly, differently able, female, or who have minor children, have expressed concerns about personal safety, schedule reliability, and frequency of bus and rail transit. Here at the intersection of Fairfax, Olympic, and San Vicente, also referred to as the Fairfax asterisk, we have 5 bus stops. And if you go up Fairfax to Wilshire, there will soon be a metro station there. It is a very difficult intersection to traverse just for our community alone. So my question to the candidates is, what specific steps would you take to address safety, reliability, and frequency, and how would you pay for it? And on this question, we're going to start with Molly Basler. Chuck, I think Molly is muted. Could you fix that?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I live near that intersection. I drive through it all the time and it drives me crazy. So we were talking about that today. You know, I would like to try, you know, to gather the community. I'm a big believer in gathering people, hearing what they have to say, you know, having town halls and inspiring people to, what we really need is to have less cars. Our city, it's, you know, and to carpool. And it's not safe necessarily for bikes either, but to, you know, maybe have more stop signs along there, roundabouts, because people do speed through there, the intersection, and then the buses. I also think that we have a lot of buses, and I have noticed that a lot of them are empty. So how do we inspire people to get on the bus so we have less cars, people to carpool? And then I believe the safety issues would be deterred. And we could possibly, you know, have less gridlock. And like I said, it would be safer for the pedestrians. And then we wouldn't have to be put a lot of money into this for the changes to make people feel safe and have that intersection to be cleared up a bit, and so people feel safe, that live there. And like me, I drive through there all the time.
Thank you. Okay, Katie Yaroslavsky.
So just to clarify, Brad, you're asking about sort of first mile, last mile, and the pedestrian access, and then also the transportation itself? Was that the question?
It's kind of an open question because it's
Okay.
got a number of moving parts, and I apologize if I didn't word it well.
It's
What
okay.
we're asking for is a common, let me cancel that. We're asking for what specific steps you would take to address safety for people, to get more people to use it, reliability and frequency so more people are interested in using it, and how we would pay for these steps. Because right now, and I'm editorializing a little bit, it's broken. And if most people in my neighborhood would probably not use the metro station because it's a very inhospitable path to get through the Fairfax Asterix and then go all the way up Fairfax without a place to sit, no shade, sidewalks are broken. And even if you were using that, as people know, if let's say you wanted to go to the valley, it takes 3 hours to take buses to get to the valley from here. No one can commute like that. So what solutions are our STEAM panel of candidates going to ask or offer? Does that help understand the question?
Yeah, and we have a minute for that. Sure.
I'm sorry I'm being mean. You guys are all welcome to come back again, and we can give more time to these topics. And I'm apologizing to the folks that didn't make it in because we didn't order enough space. But we will have this available for people to view who didn't get in today. And now I'm going to be quiet and let you go forward.
Okay, thanks, Brad. So look, I think one of the things that's been missing for a long time from our conversations about transportation has been bringing voices of people who actually use that transportation into the decision-making process, right? So people who use the bus, people who use Metro, people who want to use Metro and maybe don't because they don't feel safe. And so that's something that's really important, and we need to be doing more of that. You mentioned sort of pedestrian intersections and safety getting to and from that transportation. And I did a Zoom a couple months ago, and 4 people out of 20 had been hit by cars crossing the street in the last couple of years. And that's actually fairly common. It wasn't a gross overstatement of the ratio. And so I think we have a real public health crisis there. And fortunately, LADOT is within the purview of the council office. And so it's going to be a priority of mine to make sure we're keeping people safe by doing a better job with our street crossings. And then lastly, look, the feds have a ton of money right now. The state has a lot of money right now. I think we should make it all free, and we should get some funding from the state and the feds and figure out how to make it an equity issue.
Thank you. And I promise in the next time we all get together, maybe after the holidays, we will provide more time for this topic, and I will have a better worded question. Sam Yebri, you are up.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I skipped Scott Epstein. My apologies. I'm looking at my list. So Scott Epstein, you're up. Sorry.
Thank you, Brad. So I agree with Katie that we should be centering the voices of people that use transit, and I'm one of them. My family is car light. I have been commuting to work by bus and by bike for many years, so I'm intimately aware of the gaps in infrastructure on the ground. So we need to do a lot of things. On transit, we need to make our transit more effective and efficient. So that looks like a variety of things. It looks like proper bus stops with shade. It looks like boarding in the back and the front of the bus. It looks like maybe bus lanes on certain corridors. It looks like fare-free transit, because this is a climate issue too. We need for people that are reliant on transit, this is a justice issue. It's also, we need to be driving people to transit to lower carbon emissions. You also talked about safety, and I think it's really important to talk about first mile, last mile solutions, because if we want people to use transit, they're only going to use it if they can get there. So that looks like better infrastructure for walking and biking.
Scott, I'm going to promise that the next time we get together, we will talk about first and last mile solutions. Sam Yebri, now it's your turn.
All right, thank you. So I too believe in public transportation. I use it myself. Haven't had a car for 6 years, although my wife has a car for our 4 kids. And I see the challenges on the street every day. And I think this issue of the cleanliness and the safety is really an important one. We're making a $9.5 billion investment in the transit in Los Angeles, especially this purple line that's coming to Beverly Hills, Century City, Westwood Village, and VA. And folks need to believe that it'll get them where they want to go, but also needs to be clean, safe, to use your word, Brad, hospitable. And I think that's a real concern here. And we shouldn't undercount that. And if we're going to incentivize people to go, we have to make this a great use of our tax dollars. So I believe there's some technology. There's a role for better lighting, infrastructure upgrades, bike lanes, and there's also a role for law enforcement here. I think that there's been a movement to defund the Metro PD and LAPD here, and if we're going to have perhaps a portion of the 100,000 people that drive into Westwood every day, to drive into UCLA, and we want more of those folks to take public transportation, folks need to feel that it's going to be safe. I think that the first and last mile issues are incredibly important. I see that every day. We have to make it easier and safer for folks to get to and from the stations. And then we got to build housing in a place so people can actually use the station. We're spending, again, $9.5 billion. Let's make sure people use the stations. I think it's a massive priority for the next council member.
Thank you. Jimmy Biblars.
So I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts for many years, a highly walkable and bikeable city. And for years, there was an unprotected bike lane running through much of the city, and it was highly trafficked, but really dangerous on the narrow streets. And there were a series of bicyclist deaths in a single year, prompting action. They lifted the bike lane to curb level and put in a series of protected barricades along the bike lane. And the results were immediate and fabulous. More bikers biking more safely, and it should not have had to come from human deaths to see those changes. LA has a lot to learn from East Coast cities when it comes to transit. Boston has done a really impressive job converting general traffic lanes to rapid bus only lanes. I'd like to tell a quick story about an old family friend, Jody Ziegler, who some of you might know. Her daughter was hit by a car while waiting for the school bus. The tragedy was unthinkable, and I'll never forget hearing about her death. Jody remained a transit activist here for years, but was constantly running up against a political system built on the car-only model. And I think about Julia's death often, how difficult and dangerous it is for children to get around our city. And I hope in a small way to honor her death through policies that make it easier and safer for people to get around. Every traffic death is a preventable death, period.
Thank you. Christina Irwin.
Thank you. Okay, so basically it is a safety issue. And number one, let me just say that we need to talk to the constituents in that area. As Katie mentioned, the ones who actually use this public transportation. I would like to, as the next councilwoman, get their input. I want to invite them in. Let's have a discussion. My door's open. Tell me what you need from me. And, City Council has discretionary funds. Nobody has mentioned that. So that is something to think about in terms of using it for this particular issue that we have at hand, and clean bus stops without the vagrants there, definitely lighting. You want shade, you want kids to be there, but also law enforcement plays a part. As Sam mentioned, that's very important in my opinion, especially during rush hour. The law enforcement that directs traffic maybe during a certain time, whether it's rush hour or, morning rush hour as opposed to evening rush hour. But that's something to think about. That's a public safety issue, opening the door to have the constituents speak their minds and tell us what they want, and using some of the discretionary funds that City Council has in their reservoir. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Topic number 5 is police accountability. And because I've seen in the chat a number of questions about police funding or defunding or reimagining, I want to try and merge that into the question a bit based on the feedback we're getting. There are many areas where police training on how to handle a situation and the resources needed by specific victims is lacking. There's a lot of discussion right now about what we should do to make the system better and the levels of enforcement, whether it's, do we always send the police? Do we send psychotherapists? Do we send people and so on? What would you want to do if you could reimagine the police budget so that you could encourage a greater connection and trust between all the stakeholders. I know that's a big question, but the idea is if we have a fixed amount of money, whatever it is, how would you want to retool it to make the best of the situation we have? And that question is going to go first to Katie Yaroslavsky.
So there are a bunch of things that we've asked law enforcement to start doing over the last decade or so that wasn't traditionally within the purview of law enforcement, right? We have them responding to homelessness encampments. We have them responding to mental health calls. There's a ton of stuff they're doing that most officers don't actually want to be doing, and they're not really trained to be doing. And so we have an opportunity to start to shift some of that work to other folks who are better trained to manage it. So the city's doing some of that. There's a pilot with D.D. Hirsch, for example, to divert 911 calls when someone calls about a mental health situation. And that's been great, and we should fully fund that and make it permanent. The same goes for nonviolent calls around homeless encampments. We need a new classification of worker that is part social worker, part sort of public safety, community safety, and health worker. And so that's something that would be a priority for me. And I think the county and the city should be working in partnership to create that new category of worker who can more appropriately respond. I think we need a fully funded service corps, and that needs to include police officers, and they should be focused on doing police work. I think most police officers would agree that that's the best use of their time. And we have them working double and sometimes triple shifts, and that's not good for anyone either. So making sure they're fully staffed is important.
Okay, Scott Epstein.
Yeah, I would agree with Katie on this. I mean, I think that, we have our police officers doing a lot of things that they're not trained to do. And we're spending a lot of money because cops cost a lot of money. And we need to figure out how to work more smartly. We need to reallocate some of those funds towards mental health professionals that can respond, that have the training to respond to our unhoused neighbors. We're also spending a lot of money. We just talked about transportation. We're spending a lot of money for LAPD's traffic divisions to respond to crashes, to collisions that involve serious injuries and death. We should be reallocating some of those funds to actually making the streets safer. So I think we often get into this sort of back and forth about defund the police. And I think sometimes it's not a very useful conversation. We need to think about, how do we use our dollars the best way? And it's not all going to be, and we're asking our police officers to do a lot of things that they're not equipped to do. And as Katie said, I think the average police officer does not want to be dealing with, homeless calls all day long. We want them, by the way, solving crimes. We have a huge increase in crime in Melrose and other places where I was the neighborhood council chair, and we need to deal with that. We're only going to be able to deal with that if we adequately fund actual police work, not things that police can't do.
Thank you. Sam Yebri.
Scott, thank you for finally using the word crime that's on all of our minds. It's the issue behind homelessness that I hear about every single day, right? Right now, gun and gang violence is skyrocketing. It's up 70%, murders up 30%, including the 5th district. Down the street from Carthay and Beth Am, there's a murder of Gabe Denai in Beverly Grove. There's 3 murders in 3 weeks on 3 different blocks on Melrose. A young aspiring musician, Jaron Bradford, was killed at the Shoe Palace. Streetcar racing down Olympic killed Monique Munoz. Anti-Semitism at Sushi Fumi and on Pico. I mean, our city's spiraling out of control. So let's get serious about how to address it. And I've worked really hard on the board of our HOA, on the city's gun violence prevention task force, and on LAPD Citizens Academy to take on crime. But I also believe that's imperative that we continually improve how our cities is policed. We got to root out police bias, root out police violence. We do that with better recruiting, training, oversight, accountability, and we have to restructure police responsibilities. They're the only city employees that are armed, trained, and ready to run into the line of fire to protect our families. Let's get them out of the mental health business, out of babysitting, film production, and DWP lines, and traffic control, and noise complaints. They want to be out patrolling to keeping our families safe. And now is the time to do that. We can do both. We can oppose systemic racism and keep our neighborhoods and families safe.
Thank you. Jimmy Biblars.
My number one priority as a city council member, as a city official, is community safety. Anyone who wants to go into government, who wants to serve, their number one priority should be keeping all elements, all dimensions, all people within their community safe. That's the number one goal. I think it's important, though, to put ourselves back in the moment of last summer when we saw a series of deaths of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of so many others at the hands of the police. There is no greater abuse of state power than police violence against its citizens. It is a serious and important issue that vastly disproportionately affects people of color. And if we aren't talking about that in our conversation about policing, we aren't addressing the issue holistically. There have been understandable, important calls for change. Train mental health workers for crisis response, modeled after the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon. Unarmed officers for the vast majority of police calls, which are nonviolent, and getting police out of traffic maintenance. Police perform essential services, but we also know that policing is not equal and that police violence vastly and overwhelmingly affects people of color. And we need to honor that and respect that and center that in all of our conversations around crime and policing.
Thank you. Okay, Christina Irwin.
Well, in my opinion, it all comes down to recalling George Gascon. I mean, this is a person, honestly, who, you know, people commit crimes and for misdemeanors, 900, they're back out. There's no consequence. So that's number one. Let's really call it what it is. It's about the crimes. This needs to stop. And the only way we can make that stop, it starts at home with people teaching their children. It starts with, you know, ruling out those people such as George Gascon. There is no place in CD-5 or anywhere in Los Angeles or California for that matter of somebody not, you know, having the discipline for the crime that they've committed. So number one, I am for defending our police. We actually need them. We need them in our schools. What happened to kids actually talking to policemen in the schools? What happened to building a community rapport, you know, with PAL, Police Activities League, and other such wonderful programs that used to be implemented? You know, taking the money out of the police department is such a bad idea. And that's where the crime begins. So in my opinion, we definitely need police for the big crimes. Yes.
Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
Molly Basler. Molly, are you?
Yeah, I'm there, sorry. Yeah, I am not for defunding the police, I'm for reforming. I also believe that, police shouldn't be called out for homeless issues or things that aren't extreme, that we should get advocates from the city. And I said some of them could be homeless people that have been recovered from drug and alcohol that become homeless advocates. I know that crime is on the rise, and I believe in getting the community to trust the police again, right? We need to get, once again, I always talk about this, town halls, getting the police and the community together. I believe in community watches, getting back to that old fashioned, where the community watched each other. You have a neighborhood, captain, and I know Palms, some people in Palms are doing that. And I think those are things that need to happen, that we take care of each other. I think it also comes down to the leadership, that the leaders are out there talking to the people, going out to these areas, talking to small business owners, talking to the people who have been subjected to crime, and saying that we are here, we have an ear. And I believe the Black Lives Matter, all of those riots could have been quelled if leaders had come out and talked to the people. The people want to be heard, and that we are public servants to serve the people, not big business, not special interest. And I think together as leaders and police helping the community. We can do this.
Right, thank you. My next question goes in a little bit of an opposite direction, which is fiscal responsibility. Well, at the current moment, we have some wonderful funding from the federal government, which I hope that whoever gets elected here will help us use wisely. The increasing costs of running our city on a structural long-term basis are well known. And we apparently have a structural deficit, according to the LA Times, caused by police and fire wage increases and rising pension costs. And so what are the top 3 priorities you have to reduce city expenses? I'm not asking you necessarily to cut the police budget, not saying that, because we just talked about how to reimagine that. But are there 3 areas of the city budget you think we can make more efficient or cut so that we can be on a better footing in the years ahead? And our first person to answer that will be Scott Epstein. Sorry, Epstein.
Thank you, Brad. So I don't think we're doing a very good job on the expenditure side or the revenue side. I'm going to talk a little bit about the revenue side because we have to think about both of them. So I'm going to talk about small business. Small business is one of the engines of Los Angeles, and we make it extremely hard to build small businesses in this town. That's where we get a lot of our tax revenue for. But you know, if you're the Cheesecake Factory, you can get your project through the expediting process. If you're a minority or Black-owned small entrepreneur trying to build something special, neighborhood serving, you're smacked with all kinds of stuff. You've got a change of use for parking, and all of a sudden you've dropped $15,000 on a restaurant that would have made La Brea wonderful, and you can't do it anymore. So we need to kind of cut through the red tape and make sure you can actually, this is a town that actually welcomes entrepreneurs and welcomes neighborhood serving businesses. That's going to bring more revenue into our coffers. That's one thing that we need to do.
All right. Thank you. Sam Yebri.
I love this question. I'm glad we're talking about the budget. The city of LA has over an $11 billion city budget annually. And there is so much waste, fraud, and abuse in that. I'll give you one example. So one of my supporters was a former senior advisor to the mayor. And I asked him, give me some examples of things that we could do better. And he said, we have over 30 different procurement departments in the city of LA. People and budgets for buying water and paper and all different types of things. If we consolidated that to a handful, we would save $50 million a year. There's things like that. We just are not a nimble, flexible city. And if you look at other cities that are eating our lunch next to Los Angeles, we don't have to go out of state to Texas or Florida. We just got to look at Culver City and West Hollywood. And we have to look at Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. They do things nimbly, flexibly, and very efficiently. And I appreciate that Scott bringing up small businesses, because they really are the backbone of our city. I think all of us are really concerned about the small businesses that we love just disappearing all around town. And I'm a small business owner. I own a law firm. I know what it means to pay payroll and rent and workers' comp and have to pay that February 28th payroll, gross receipts, business city tax. And business owners don't feel like they're getting any value from our city. Our city services being cut. And why would you start a business in Los Angeles? Why would you scale it, right? And there are some real ways to improve that. And I'm excited about one big engine that's coming to two big engines coming to our district. One is transportation. It's an opportunity to really, with these subway lines coming to revitalize neighborhoods. And then Google on the west side of the district is bringing 500,000 square feet of a footprint. And that's going to create an opportunity to really create new businesses and vibrancy, focus on tech, and create a corridor that will lift everyone up. And I'm really excited to figure out how we can revitalize these neighborhoods. And if we had more time, I'd talk about Westwood Village, which is really close to my
heart. We're out of time for your answer here. Thank you.
Next time.
Okay, next time. Jimmy Biblars, please.
Thanks so much for the question. When I think about tools of fiscal responsibility, I think a lot about President Biden's Build Back Better plan. And the idea of Build Back Better is that if we think long-term, and if we're not so mired in short-termist thinking, and that if we use the tools of government to lift people up, to get people out of poverty, to get people into housing, and to improve infrastructure locally and nationally, in the long run, that creates a more self-sufficient economic engine that isn't subject to these incredible swings of fiscal finances. And that's the model that I think we need to think about locally, that so much of what we do is so expensive because of short-term thinking. If we ended homelessness, if we cleared encampments and stopped the economic precarity of so many in CD-5, 70% of CD-5 is renters, half of those renters severely rent burdened. The economic ramifications, the economic benefits of that in the long run would be tremendous. So when I think about fiscal responsibility, I think about how do we lift people up to the point that our budget is more naturally working properly.
All right, thank you. Christina Irwin.
Small business is the heart with this city. You know, I have a lot of friends in small business that have lost their business, unfortunately, because of the lockdowns and the closures. And it comes down, in my opinion, to less regulation, maybe give them more incentives, you know, maybe have a couple more scholarships available. Some businesses can partner with other businesses to help small mom and pop shops grow and do their own financing, because it's really, really hard for small businesses. And, you know, I'm an advocate, being a small business owner myself, an entrepreneur, I know what it's like. And I think definitely, you know, if we can prevent that, definitely on a federal level, I'm talking about less taxes, but on a state level, especially with the CD-5, I'm talking about less regulations for generating more revenue for the small businesses. They would have more motivation, more opportunity to do better.
All right. Let's see, Molly Bassler.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I think too, I mean, we have so much waste in the city, and what Jimmy had talked about is that the homelessness we pay for, you know, the cleanups, the waste, trying to get these people off the street instead of solving the problems. We keep putting Band-Aids over the jugular that's, you know, draining the city dry. We also, you know, we have all these tax breaks for developers. You know, people haven't really talked about that either. The city council, you know, with the tax breaks and the inefficiency within the city government that is bleeding the city, you know, dry also. Once again, putting the Band-Aid over the jugular, which we must stop. Protecting, once again, I'm also a small business owner, the small businesses, and keeping our communities thriving and not, you know, so many small businesses have closed down because of COVID, and also inspiring people, which I'm just a big, you know, supporter of getting people together and educating them of what is going on in their neighborhoods, so they can make changes. It changes in the communities on the grassroots level. And so once we change that and stop all the waste with it, which is in-house in City Hall, the perks that the public officials get, we need to build up honesty and integrity in all levels of the government, and no longer tax breaks, and helping the people in the community where they're not losing businesses and the city isn't losing money. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to go to Chuck Marquardt, who's going to give
You
us
want me to answer that question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm
Terribly
happy-
sorry.
whatever.
I
All
did
right.
not mean to cut you off. I lost track. Katie Yaroslavsky, please answer the question, and then we'll go to Chuck. My apologies.
Sure. So three things we can do. I think the first is obvious. We need to be living within our means. Structural deficits aren't healthy, and we shouldn't be spending what we can't sustain. I'm a progressive who thinks we need to be paying our bills, and failure to do that jeopardizes everything else. The city has come close several times to bankruptcy, and it's not a pipe dream that we can ignore. The second thing is that government is really labor intensive. So we need to be fair and competitive and responsible in our labor negotiations and make sure that we can sustain what we commit to. The other side of that coin, I think, is to make sure we're adequately and fully staffing our departments so that we don't have to pay people a huge amount in overtime. We've got a lot of departments that are very intensive on using overtime, and then that really causes budgets to explode. So, and then the third thing is really about being aggressive and spending responsibly. We shouldn't be having evergreen contracts when we pay for things which have long been in the rearview mirror. Ron Galperin, the controller, has done some really good reporting and digging on this issue. And we have a lot of opportunities to renegotiate a bunch of stuff, and we should do that.
Thank you. And again, my apologies. Now, Chuck, you're up with the question.
Yes, so several people, including Ted Davidson, would like to ask each of the candidates, how are you going to address the rising crime in the city?
Okay, and we're going to start with Sam Yebri on that question.
Yeah, as a father of four, nothing is more important than protecting my family. And similarly, nothing can possibly be a higher priority for local government than protecting our residents. If we look at the rising crime, there's gun violence, there's gang violence, there's streetcar racing, there's arsons being set. So, I don't support, like I said earlier, defunding the police. I don't think that's the way to improve how our neighborhoods are policed. I think we can improve policing by doing that, by doing something else, which is restructuring how police officers do their job. Let's get them out on the streets. Let's get them patrolling our neighborhoods. Let's invest in technology. Let's invest in proven methods of how we can create visibility to deter crime. I think criminals, we will all agree, becoming more brazen than we've ever experienced in our lifetimes. And it's time for us, neighborhood groups, homeowners and renters, businesses, bids, activists of all type to come together, because this is not an issue that should be partisan in any way. We all have to work together to keep our neighborhoods and our families safe. And unfortunately, it's law enforcement is the ones who can keep us most safe right now. And there's a way to do that in a better way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jimmy Biblars, please.
Thanks so much for the question, Ted. As I said in my prior answer, there is no more important function of a local elected official than keeping communities safe. And that would be my number one priority on city council. I did a JD PhD at Harvard. My PhD is in sociology and social policy. And so much of my research, I now teach at UCLA Law School. And so much of my research there was about the causes and repercussions of crime. And I think a set of research-driven solutions that get at the heart of what's causing crime is really the mode that will penetrate and successfully reduce the rising crime rates. It's about keeping guns off the streets with aggressive local gun control laws. It's about ending street racing and making streets safer for all, ensuring that streets are more walkable. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the rise in anti-Semitic hate crime. My last name Biblars, my grandfather's family fled the Polish Holocaust in the late 30s. It used to be Biblarski. I think it's the only time that an Americanized name was made harder to pronounce, moving from Biblarski to Biblars.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. We're getting to wrap up. And after this question, we're going to go to closing statements from people. It looks like we will have time for that. Christina Irwin.
So it's basically, thank you. So it's basically, like I said, penalizing the criminals. It starts with, getting more serious with them, whether it's shoplifting, whether it's, arson. We have to get more serious. We have to deter the criminals. That's number one. Number two, definitely give money to the police. We need to defend our police officers. And the third thing is what I talked about. We need to have police community engagement. We have, some communities at odds with the police when we need to have them all together, whether that's at, certain functions, like I mentioned before, the Police Activities League, or I know before they had a firefighters ball, but something to that extent where the community can get involved along with neighborhood councils and neighborhood watchdogs. I think that's where it starts. That's the most important.
Okay, thank you very much. Molly Basler. Molly, I think you might be muted.
I know. Okay, sorry. I don't know what, I unmute, then it mutes, and so sorry about that. Crime, this is such a deep issue, actually. It's systemic. And the disparity between the rich and the poor are getting greater, and that's not just in Los Angeles, that is throughout our country. But I mean, going back to the roots of it, I think it's about educating people and getting people jobs. That is going to help with the crime rate. People are in desperate times also, and providing more services for that to help people get out of poverty. Yes, of course, like as I said, it's not about defunding the police, it's about reforming, but having more police presence, creating stronger laws. I believe in changing the Second Amendment, actually, and outlawing the guns altogether, but that's another subject. But once again, it's about getting people out of poverty, helping people get educated and getting them employed.
Thank you. Katie Yaroslawski.
Thanks. So I was talking to a senior LAPD officer recently about this issue, and she said that anyone who says they know what's causing crime to go up is lying. It's too complicated, and there are so many reasons for rising crime. We could talk all day about it. So instead of let's just focus on sort of the solutions, right? We know what's happening in CD-5. It's happening in the Melrose District, the rise in anti-Semitism, the murders that have recently been happening in the 5th. It's really shocking, and it's unsettling, and it's scary. And I commit to partnering with LAPD and our communities to make sure we're providing public safety in a more intentional, smart way. We should be using data and better tools. We should be working with LAPD to make sure that we have the same officers working the same beats and developing relationships. We stopped doing that a while ago, and it was a mistake. And I think we should get back to that. Also, just having more people out on the streets. Once COVID starts to wane, I think people are going to be out more. And with people out in more numbers, it's going to make people feel safer, and it's going to make healthier, safer communities. So I think that we're sort of in a weird time right now with COVID, and but I do think we need to be intentional in partnering with LAPD to make sure that they're funded to do the work we need them to do, and that's be out on the streets, making sure communities are safe.
Okay, thank you. Scott Epstein.
Thank you, Brad. So I think we have to do a few things. One is we need to address the social and economic conditions that create crime. And so this is a city of deep have and have-nots. And so we need to deal with both the revenue side and both the labor side and also what people spend money on. So we need to deal with housing, transportation, job training. We need to support our labor movement. The second thing we need to do is reinvest in community policing. People on the street, developing relationships with community members. That's how we solve crimes. And the third thing that I would say is we have a crisis of public confidence in our police, particularly among our Black and brown neighbors. And so we need to address accountability, because if we are going to truly invest in community policing, all members of our community need to trust the police. And we are not immune to deep issues around conduct in this city. And so we need to deal with that. We need to make sure that we deal with excessive use of force, with improper conduct, and we need to make sure our officers are accountable when they do the wrong thing.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I believe everyone has answered this question. I just want to make sure I don't leave anyone out. And we are now going on to closing statements. And so we're going to start the closing statements with Jimmy Biblars.
Well, this has been quite an evening. I think this is the first time all 6 of us have been together, and it's been lovely. And I imagine there's going to be a lot more of this throughout the campaign, both with your group and with others. So I just want to start by thanking my fellow candidates. I think it's been wonderful to get to know you in the last couple of weeks and to hear our ideas. I think there's a lot of common ground here, and I'd like to thank all of the co-hosts, the homeowners associations, and Temple Beth Am for putting this on. I love the Carthay neighborhoods. I feel like I grew up partially there, and I'm eager to support you when elected to city council. We have a really exciting campaign. I put my personal cell phone number and email address in the chat. Our campaign is focused on getting to the heart of the issues. No more Band-Aids for lasting problems. We're trying to make this city a place where everyone can afford to thrive. If we don't act decisively and quickly, Los Angeles will become a place where only the 1% can afford to live. It is a reality that is coming quick, but we can change it. And I think our campaign has some really exciting stuff to offer. Please check us out online, jimmybiblars.com, and please give me a call or send me an email. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm just going to amplify that one message. Ladies and gentlemen who are watching, please reach out, look at the websites of all of the candidates that you've heard here tonight. We have some great candidates for you to consider. Christina Irwin, you are next.
Hi, thank you. Okay, I just want to close up by saying thank you to everybody who is on the Zoom call and to the other candidates. I appreciate that. I just want to let everybody know that I am for our men and women in blue. I am for our law enforcement. I am definitely for school choice. That's a big one for me, being a mom to 3 kids currently with the situation that's going on at LAUSD. Please check out my website. Obviously, we talked about homelessness and the wraparound idea that I have, including the mental clinics and also, having wraparound services for the drug and alcohol addiction. I mean, a lot of that is it's not a one-stop shop that's going to be a quick fix. This is something that's going to take, unfortunately, a lot of time. And I hope not a lot of our resources, but again, my door will always be open as city councilwoman. I need to hear from my constituents. I welcome your thoughts. And my website is ChristinaIrwin.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Molly Basler.
Hi, okay. I'm a progressive Democrat. I am here to serve. I'm a people-powered grassroots candidate. You can reach out to me. I want to be available, transparent, and accountable. I want to create a green dream city for Los Angeles. We didn't talk about the climate crisis, which is, we are actually in. It is one of the greatest threats to our humanity in the city all around the world. So as I said, I'm running a green and regenerative campaign to be an example. I believe as leaders, we need to lead by example. It's not the speeches we make, it's the actions we take. You can reach out to me at mollyla2022.com, connect and ask me questions, reach out, get involved. I appreciate the time and thank you to all the sponsors tonight and to my fellow candidates. And I can't wait till when we actually meet and have a live event. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm hoping that we can do a live event next time. We were concerned about the surge, and then there will be much more response from the audience because I know there will be a lot of applause this evening. All right, Katie Darslowski.
Thanks, Brad and Chuck and Temple Betham for putting this on. I feel like I'm in my home turf here tonight in my neighborhood. And thanks to all my fellow candidates. This was fun. I didn't think it was going to be fun. I was nervous. And it was a pleasure. Thanks to everyone for coming. I think you heard a lot about a lot of different challenges we're facing as a city. But I don't think any of these problems are intractable. I wouldn't be running if I thought they were. We can make meaningful progress on all of this. And the way we do that is by electing people who understand how to do the work because they've been doing the work and they have a proven track record of doing the work. And I'm that person. And so I hope you'll consider joining me. Check out the website. Drop me a line. I'm going to put my email and my campaign website in the chat box. It's katie@la.com. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Epstein.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you to the neighborhood associations and Temple Betham and the Maritime Group for sponsoring tonight. I am running for council because I believe we need to build a more sustainable, healthy, and just city. And I believe that is possible. I think our problems in LA are not for lack of resources or smart ideas or smart people to implement them. It is for lack of political will and the skill in bringing communities along towards change. I have that skill set. I've done that work for a decade. I will also say that our campaign is by far the most high engagement campaign of all of our peers. So we have been doing urban hikes, we have been doing policy forums, we have been doing public fundraisers, meet and greets, neighborhood cleanups. We believe we can only change the city together. So I invite you to join me, scottforla.com.
Thank you. Sam Yebri, you are batting cleanup.
All right. Speaking of which, go Dodgers. We're up right now. Running for office is not easy, and I commend all the candidates for putting ourselves out there and for a really thoughtful conversation tonight. I want to thank the Carthay Neighborhood Association, the Temple Beth Am, for convening us and for doing the important work throughout the year. Despite all the challenges we've discussed tonight, Los Angeles is still a great city, and it's not because of the weather or the studios or our beaches, but it's because of our incredible people. But for far too long, the people who run this city have not reflected the energy, creativity, integrity, and diversity that define us as Angelenos. Instead, these insiders have driven our city into the ground. The elections in June are our chance to elect new leadership, our chance to elect a fighter and not an insider. Our campaign is about fighting for Los Angeles and the 5th District for everyone. And we know that we aren't going to get out of this mess by following the same old script. And we're honored to have support from legendary leaders like Congressman Henry Waxman, Holly Mitchell, and more than 1,000 community leaders who live in the district, including many Beth Am board members, because they recognize my years of service and my commitment to challenging the status quo. Please join us at samforla.com. And I know that government can't do this alone, so I need you, not just to campaign with, but to govern, because we need all of us to work together to fight for a better Los Angeles.
Thank you. And what I'm going to say now is the residents of the Carthay community are not going anywhere. We are going to continue to fight for our city. I hope people will choose wisely among the candidates who they think will best represent them and get involved in the campaigns. This is why we did this so early. The primary is in June, but get involved now. And I will be emailing the candidates again soon, so perhaps we can get together again and focus on some more very important issues. I want to thank everyone involved here. This was inspiring in the way that we had hoped. The only real technical flaw we had is there were a lot of people that couldn't get in. And in politics, that's a good thing. So we're going to post this for people and we will get back to everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you for making the time for us.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.